All right, in studio we have Dr. AJ Sumell. Welcome. Glad you came down. How you been?
Thanks. Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Things are going well.
So a lot of stuff happening up at YSU. Before we get into all of that, why don't you kind of give me your history? You're a professor of economics up at the university, but give a little bit of your origin story.
Sure. So, I've been here since 2005 at YSU. This was my first job out of graduate school. Went to graduate school at Georgia State in Atlanta. Before that, I grew up in Long Island, New York. Then did my undergraduate studies at Salisbury State University, Eastern Shore, Maryland, small liberal arts school there. But yeah, been here for more than 18 years now. It's a long time.
Wow.
On the more
Now, do you
senior
prefer
faculty.
the cold climate that we got? I mean, it looks like you like New York and the Northeast and then Georgia, which is the heat.
I do enjoy seasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I do miss a lot about Atlanta, or at least the climate of Atlanta. But I honestly don't mind the winters here. It's more the lack of sun that I mind.
Yes, the gray skies are the constant.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see the sun again until March, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, so I've been a professor of economics at YSU since 2005, and I'm also heavily involved in the faculty union. So I'm currently the lead negotiator for the faculty union, which I've been since 2020, so like 3.5 years. And then before that, I was the president and vice president and a number of different positions.
Now, did you know you were going to be in the mathematics, economics industry?
No, not really. I mean, honestly, I majored in it in undergraduate,
Okay.
and always did well and enjoyed parts of it, and then didn't really know what I was going to do. And one of my old professors went to Georgia State and contacted me and said, "I think you'd do well in graduate school." And that, honestly, that single call probably changed my life, because I was like, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So just sent off an application, got accepted, and then yeah, trucked through for 6 years in graduate school. And can't say I particularly enjoyed all of that, but I think it was worth it. In that it allowed me to get a job that I do enjoy, and so I've been happy with the job here for the past 18 years.
Yeah, I think math is just so important, and the more minds we mold that have a great understanding of it, and I think you do a great job with that university up on top of the hill there. So great credit to you.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Math is super important, but not just the really highly technical stuff, but just a basic understanding. And I think economics broadly is important. That it's more broad than I think most people recognize, in that it's not just about money or stocks or GDP or these technical terms. It's really just about understanding choices, and it could be choices of individuals and firms and policymakers in general.
Yeah. So every time I'm down at WFMJ, I read your little note about you only call me when a meteors are about to strike the earth, that kind of comment.
Yeah, right.
And bad times, they always want to get the economy. Now, are you optimistic, or are you a little pessimistic? Like, where are you at in this cycle?
Well, I guess it depends whether you're thinking just for the Youngstown economy or for the national.
Let's do national
economy.
first.
So national, I mean, I'd say short term, I am relatively optimistic. So short term meaning like the next year, maybe two. I think it looks like the Fed is kind of has been able to, it's not known for sure, but has been able to kind of thread the needle of that soft landing, of bringing inflation down without having a significant spike in unemployment, right? Because they have the dual goals of keeping unemployment low and keeping inflation low. And obviously inflation was a big problem, but it's decreased more rapidly than really anybody was expecting, including at the Federal Reserve. So we've gone down from nearly 10% a few years ago to below 3%, and the target is 2%, right? So things are looking good, and we have not seen, in terms of prices and disinflation, and we have not seen a big increase in unemployment. And I expect that would continue at least throughout 2024. Long term, I do think we have challenges, and so it's like, who knows what anything's going to be like in 5 years.
Right.
So it's hard to even kind of try and project or forecast anything in 5 years. But we do have long-term fiscal challenges in terms of our debt's pretty significant. It just keeps on growing,
Right.
and nobody seems to be willing to try to address that,
Right.
right? But at some point, we're going to have to. And so, yeah, short-term optimistic, long-term not so optimistic.
Okay. Now, if I were to throw you on the federal level, right? You're a policymaker now. You get to wield the scepter of getting your way no matter what. What moves would you make?
So, I mean, as far as addressing those long-term challenges is, given our fiscal situation, it's like you do have Republicans saying that we just have to cut spending, and then Democrats saying, well, we just got to increase taxes, particularly on the wealthy. And then they just agree to increase spending and cut taxes, right? Because that's more popular, right?
Right.
So in general, it's like they're both right in a sense. We do have to cut spending because our spending is just far above our tax revenue, but we also could increase our tax revenues and try and just moderate the level of that federal debt and federal deficit through both. So if I were, and I would never be a politician, but if I were a politician and I had the ability, it would be both: one, increase tax rates on the wealthiest in particular, not significantly but modestly, and then two, decrease the level of spending to try to bring the two closer to each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think guys like you who are really smart in when it comes to this kind of stuff versus a policymaker that people are hanging on to their every word. So even if they want to do the smart thing, like the moment that they say the thing, it almost makes the changes on the negative and positive side. And it might not be data driven. It's
Yeah.
all hype and whatever. And you play that political game and it's hard to get real math to really come out.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and it's like the political reality is always far different from the economic reality, right? That what politicians say and what they can actually sell, what's politically sellable,
Right.
Is typically not what's economically best,
Right.
And so I don't know how that bridge is ever going to be crossed, but at some point it has to be, right? Because we cannot continue on the path that we're currently on.
We just follow that pendulum swing from chaos on either side, and that's what we go. Oh, crisis over here, and then
Yeah.
swing back to the other one. And man, that's not probably the smartest path.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, so I think in the end we will. It's not like I think we're going to. It's going to be utter chaos in 5 years, or where our economy is going to be destroyed in any sense or anything like that. But I do think at some point we're going to have to come to some kind of reckoning, or at least recognition that changes have to be made.
I'm
in
with
order
you there.
In order to keep on a healthy, sustainable path.
All right, now what about regional? Let's apply the same kind of logic there. There's a bunch of cities that are ahead of us that have gone through historically what we've gone through. Some of them done better, some of them done worse. Feels like we're in that vacuum somewhere between those two. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm honestly more optimistic long term for the local economy than the national economy. And that's just based on the fact that we have been growing in terms of the number of jobs in this area, and we've had, I think we're at a point where we have really positive momentum, and that momentum can kind of be compounding and build on itself. That when employers see that they can come here to this region and be successful, other employers see that and also want to come here and be successful. And there are a lot of advantages, I think, to employers to this region, including obviously low cost of living, low land costs. If you're going to develop anything, relatively still low labor cost, relatively strong manufacturing skills in terms of the labor force. And so I think that's part of why you see like Kimberly Clark just made the announcement that they're coming here. That's a big employer that could lead to a lot of other potential indirect employment that happens over the next few years. and I've heard from people at the chamber that there could be more positive announcements coming this year. So I think there's a lot of really good things that are happening as far as specifically like employment in this area, where our main issue is going to be, and is actually currently, but is also going to be in the future, having the workers to fill those jobs that need to be filled. And I think our major economic problem that we faced is our decreasing population. And so being able to try to stabilize our population and actually bring more people here to fill the jobs that we know are coming is going to be what I think the big challenge is. But it's relatively a good challenge to have, right? Because historically what we've had is the opposite situation. We've had, and that's why the population has been declining for the past really 40 years, is because we've had more people than jobs, right? But now it's kind of switched, where we have more jobs and projected to have more jobs than we have the people to actually fill those jobs. And so if you're going to have a problem, this is definitely the better one to have, but it's still a problem, and it's still something that needs to be addressed. And so I do think, economic-wise, in terms of number of jobs and, to like income levels, GDP levels, things are on the up, and will continue to be on the up in this area for a good period. And then it's just going to be a matter of, well, what can we do to retain people that are currently here, in particular young people that are currently here? What can we do to attract people from outside this area, perhaps in particular people who maybe used to live here but then moved, and then maybe they're not so happy at where they currently are, and then potentially attract international people to this area.
So this is not an easy question. There's a lot of dynamics in it, but from your standpoint, would you prefer like a big employer to consolidate that's doing a couple tens of thousands, or lots of small businesses where your workforce can slower to develop, but it's a little bit more varied and we can respond to it a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, in general, it's better for an economy to have a number of medium-sized and smaller employers than to have one really large employer, right? Because it's like the old, it's like with investing, like diversification is good, because if one sector goes down, well, the other sectors can kind of counterbalance that, and so and that's also part of what's positive about what's been happening, is there is no dominant employer anymore, right? But we do have a number of medium-sized, somewhat large but not too large companies that have opened here in the past few years or are opening over the next few years, which is good because, one, if any one of them goes down, well, the economy doesn't go down with it, right? And then two, to have a kind of broader array of companies in different sectors is also just
drawing
important
from that labor force that we have lacking of anyhow, you know, because if you come in and grab 10,000, in manufacturing or in engineering or whatever, deprives the entire marketplace. And how long does it take to get 10,000 more engineers back on the street?
Exactly. Well, and the other issue is if it is one really large employer, I mean, and we are still, I think, kind of dealing with this, because even with Kimberly-Clark and with Ultium Cells and TGX Home Goods, Foxconn to some degree, as they're growing, they need to employ more workers. A lot of those workers aren't just coming from outside the area. They're currently here and working for other companies, right? Mm-hmm. So this isn't just a problem for those new jobs, right? It's really a problem for the jobs that they're going to be pulling other workers from. So the smaller companies that maybe don't have the level of pay for these larger companies, or don't have the quality of benefits as these larger companies, they're the ones that are really going to be feeling the impacts, because they're going to be losing the workers to these larger companies. Yeah. So overall, it's just a matter of bringing more people here in total, one, to fill those jobs, but two, to fill the jobs and not have the smaller companies, which are the majority of really any economy, really suffer because they lost their employees to the bigger ones.
Now, if you were to take like $1,000 and you drop it into a small business versus dropping $1,000 into a larger company, you'd assume the bigger company is going to siphon more of that off into the outside the area and be spent somewhere else versus what's here. But from an efficiency standpoint, which would you rather there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we talk about this in urban economics classes about it's tied to the idea of multiplier effects, right? And the fact is, supporting local businesses, it's kind of like this homey slogan of, well, it's good to support local business, but it actually also has a really positive impact as far as the economy. Because think for each dollar that you're spending at a corporation, like even Walmart or Target, it's something like only 30 to 40 cents stays in the local economy. Because most of it's actually going to either Target corporate in Minnesota, or just for the out of town goods that they're purchasing and selling at Target, right? But for a local small business where the owners actually live in this area, well, the profit that they receive also stays in this area, right? And so it circulates more in this area, and so it's going to have a greater impact. Every dollar that's spent at a local small business has a much greater impact in terms of the local economy than a dollar spent at a larger out-of-state or out-of-area owned business.
Now, what do you think we could do better in our area to be more friendly to the small business if we want to encourage the small business to compete with those bigger? And what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really a matter of, one, you can try and promote it, and we do try to promote it in general. You can try to have incentives like, there's the downtown Youngstown rewards that at local businesses, you get certain just basic rewards to try to incentivize people to support those local businesses. But there is no magic bullet, right? And so I think it's really just trying to put that information out there that that it is important that if there is a choice, sometimes you can't just support local business because they don't have the goods and services that you need, right? But if there is a choice, it's better to get it from the local business than from the larger, especially like big box retailers.
Right. So we're not really making a glaring mistake, or we're not doing anything wrong. It's more so that a little finesse. We're being more attractive. You said the tax base is good. We have a great labor force. We have utilities. We have everything that bigger markets have. So it already makes it more appealing. Again, getting the public on board. When we say small business, people stand in line to support small business. So we're doing a lot of things right. I just wish it would happen faster, a little bit faster turnover that way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we are doing a lot of positive things and things that we can do, but it's just trying to keep that message out there and keep that momentum moving forward.
For sure. All right, let's talk about YSU a little bit. This has come up like 50 times in the last couple months here about some of the programs that are don't have a lot of people involved or don't have a lot of graduates involved that are really important to people, and maybe even have the funding to carry those things are on the cutting board here. And so, give me your thoughts on some of the programs that might be making an exit.
So, I can't say too much specifically about which programs are being cut or how many faculty might be lost because I don't know. Right. Like this is all literally like there were announcements made yesterday. There's still some information that's being provided. There's a Senate meeting tomorrow, actually, where I think more details about exactly which programs will be cut. Exactly how many faculty might be impacted through retrenchment. But what I can say, and what's been put out there is they're largely in music and art, and I believe the other one that was announced is in geography. That when we say that those programs will be cut, it doesn't mean that no courses will be offered in those programs, or that all faculty will be lost from those programs. It's just that no new students will be able to major in those. And so, yeah, there's, I believe, 4 specific programs in music and art, and then geography. And so there will still be, a Dana School of Music. There will still be music programs that students can major in. But for the 5 that are being phased out, it just means there will be no new students accepted in those programs, and there'll be a teach out for those students who are currently majoring in those programs, I think over 2 years.
Okay. And just like any other business, if there's a lack of interest on a menu item, you temporarily take it off the menu until you can develop new interest in it, and then you can put it back on there in the future if something happens, right?
Well, I think, there's some degree of that. I'd say the only thing that gives me pause is the idea that, one, I don't think it should be looked at strictly as a number of majors, right? Because you can have at least one, if you look at it financially, there are a number of programs, econ is one of them, where the number of students that take econ classes, even if they're not majoring in economics, is much greater than the costs of providing those classes, right? So I think there is concern about looking at it strictly from the basis of, well, how many students are majoring in these programs and how many students are graduating from these programs, rather than how many students are taking classes in these programs.
Paying to be in that seat.
Yeah, because
Okay.
in the end, if you have a student in an economics class, whether they're majoring in economics or not,
gotcha.
they're paying the same amount to take that class as they would to take a class that they are actually majoring in. So a concern of mine and a concern of a number of faculty is that the upper administration, when they're making these choices, it can be kind of short-sighted based on if you're only looking at majors and you're only looking at graduates. What you should be looking at least the more important metric is the number of students taking those classes, right? Because you're as any college student, they're not only going to take classes in their major.
Right,
Actually, the
exactly.
majority of classes are going to be outside of their major, right? And so the main thing that I think should be considered is student credit hours and making these
Count
decisions.
them into the purchases of those classes.
That's right.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, so that's the YSU thing. That's new information. I appreciate that that little angle on it. So let's talk about things that are happening. Like we talked about the economy, but what about things like the stock market or any bubbles that you see or anything that's overblown, underblown? What do you think's in our future here in the next couple of years?
Well, yeah, I can't say I have any good stock tips. I mean, honestly, if anything, if I were to give you a stock tip, you should probably choose something else. Yeah. I'm not really a good investor in individual stocks, or
Right.
historically I have not been. But I do fully abide by and believe in, the classical, like, just diversify your investments
Right.
and just let it sit, and then don't even look at it.
Okay.
And then, when it's time, when you have to, then you'll see that it's a lot bigger than it was before,
Right.
right? And so, yeah, I can't say anything as far as, like, I think this is a good sector or a good company to invest in, or anything that I think is a real bubble of any kind.
Well,
I mean, I'm
let
happy
me-
to talk about it, but yeah. right.
Let's do housing, because that's one that you hear a lot about. There's a whole segment of society that almost finds housing unaffordable. It's
Yeah.
way out of their range now. And renting is difficult. You
Yeah.
have these people who just don't have options like maybe the previous generation. So I see that as a bubble. If you run
Yeah.
out of, consumers for a product, that's not a great thing. So thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, with housing, I think it is probably the most important sector for the economy, because so many other sectors are involved in it. And for most individuals, it's the most important thing you'll ever purchase, right? Is a house, and everybody, obviously, even if you're not purchasing, needs a house. I wouldn't call it a bubble to the extent that, bubbles can pop.
Right.
Housing's not going to pop in terms of there will always be a consistent demand for housing.
Right.
And our main problem now, I think, nationwide especially, not so much here, but here to some degree, is the lack of supply of housing, right? That people are reluctant to put their houses on the market, even if they are interested in moving somewhere. One, because they're often locked into low interest rates, right? And so you don't want to give up a loan where you're paying only 3% or 3.5% when.
But today you can get an 8%.
Yeah, exactly. If I move and I buy a new house, the minimum is going to be 7%, maybe more. And so that's what's been driving these high house prices, is that you still have this growing demand, as you're always going to have, but the supply has not been growing at the same pace as demand. People just are not willing to put their house on the market, largely because they know they're going to be paying a lot more in interest for any new house that they would buy. And so the only thing that I see changing that, I mean, one, you do still see, actually, it's been growing rapidly in terms of new construction, because even if people aren't willing to sell their current house, when people need a house, if they can't find someone who's willing to sell it, that's a current house, they might be willing to just have a new one built, right? And so you see new construction of homes increasing nationwide. But then, so in general, the only things that can increase the supply of housing is more people are willing to sell their house, or we have a larger quantity of new homes and apartments that are built. And so we do see movement in terms of new homes and apartments. But then the other thing that will affect it is interest rates. And once interest rates start to go down, as they're projected to start to this year, I mean, the Fed has, I think, projected to cut interest rates 3 times in 2024. And so once that starts to happen, I think you will see, well, one, if my interest rate is currently 3.5%, and then I see I can get one at 5%, maybe that's not such a big additional cost, right? And I'd be willing to sell my house, even if it's a slightly higher interest rate. And then two, as they see that, well, interest rates are going to continue to go down, maybe I'd be willing to get into an adjustable loan where if the interest rate is lower later, then I'll just get that lower interest rate later.
A couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, there was a community that needed some single-family houses. They just didn't have a good enough supply. People were always looking. There was nothing even to rent. So we were going to get a couple pieces of property and put a couple of them up. And at the time, materials costs were higher than the resale of the house. So the minute that I built it, I would have lost money. But then you fast forward 4 years, and that house today would be worth 4 times what it would have been if I'd pulled the trigger then. But now if I would have waited now, my materials costs would be lower, but my interest rates would be higher. So it's not like we need a perfect storm of let's get them all in line at the same time.
Well, it's like impossible to time it. Right?
Yep.
Because all of those variables are always changing.
Yeah.
And it's easy to look back and think, I should have done it. Right. But who knows? I mean, in 4 years, the situation could be completely different than what we think it will be or what it is now, right?
All right. Anything else to add? You got anything you want to throw in?
I mean, in general, I'm happy to talk about anything. I did think you were going to ask me about Bill Johnson.
Oh, let's talk about Bill Johnson.
Yeah, sure. So YSU, as I'm sure you know, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, is announced as the new president at YSU. He's starting, I believe the official start date is January 21st or 22nd. So starting in just a couple of weeks from now. And it was a big controversy, still is a big controversy, just based on the way he was hired and the lack of, I'd say, consultation with the campus community, in particular faculty, staff, students, alumni, even just concerned citizens.
I mean, is that typical? Like, I don't pay attention to the president. I couldn't even tell you before Tressel, I really even knew. And so I really don't know how that process works. Do they usually parade it in front of people and give them a presentation?
At YSU, we always have.
Okay.
Right? And I can't say it's usual currently with most universities do actually have a confidential search. And so this was a confidential search. but there's a way to conduct a confidential search that still involves the campus community, right? And still seeks input from the campus community. And so I think a lot of the anger from the campus community stems from the fact that it wasn't just a confidential search, which we have never done before at YSU. It's never been confidential before. So Tressel was, he gave and had open forums before they announced the hiring, along with other candidates that they were considering. And that was true for everyone prior to him too. But the fact is most universities are moving in that direction, for good or bad, that confidential searches are becoming more common amongst universities. Okay. The issue, at least I think for most of the campus community, was, okay, so you have a confidential search, but you didn't have a single open forum to seek input into what we're looking for in a president, right? There was a 2-week period where anyone could submit their opinions or thoughts on the presidential search at the end of April in 2023, and that was it. And then that was truly the extent of any kind of seeking of opinions or consultation with anybody. Was just that 2 week
Now,
period.
do you have a speculation why it seems like the hard road was taken, where if it would have been just opened up, I mean, it's non-binding, so it's not like the board had to go along with any objections to it. They could have done what they wanted to do anyhow.
That's right. I mean, and that's part of what I think
weird
is weird and makes the campus community so angry about it. Is it's not like you have to even listen to our opinion. You can seek our opinions and hear the opinions and then ignore them and still make the choice that you want to make. But you didn't even go through the process of even allowing us to express our opinions. And that was very frustrating. And so that's why it came as such a big surprise of, oh, you're just making the announcement that you already actually made the offer. So not even that, here's our leading candidate. What do you think of this candidate? It was, here's our guy. Here's the offer. We already offered him the job. And it was just like, what?
Right.
And so one, it was just shocking. You already offered the job, not just to Bill Johnson, but to anybody. And then two, there was a lot of, obviously, I'd say anger about it being someone who has a history of divisive opinions, who has no higher education experience, honestly, it's not a lot of people say, well, it's about his politics. It's not about his politics, right? It's like everyone knew Tressel was a Republican, right? You can be a Republican, still be a good president for a university. But the fact that he does have a history of divisive opinions, that he has zero higher education experience. So people were, one, kind of dumbfounded by the process and just the announcement of, here's who's going to be our president, and deal with it. And then two, who that person was.
Yeah, and so do you think back to the process question, do you think it was just missteps where they just misdid something that created a PR nightmare for them? Or do you think that was part of the strategy? There's something in it that we just don't know yet,
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, it's hard to speculate. And I've personally met with the board chair, Peterson, and I don't honestly doubt their motivations at all. I think they want to do what's best for YSU, but I do think they were either misinformed or just didn't understand that this is not the best way to do it.
Yeah.
That we need to have at least some kind of buy-in from the campus that this person is going to be leading, right? And that's what's best, not just for YSU, that's also what's best for this person that's going to be leading.
Right.
And so, I don't think, there was any kind of misdeed where they were doing something that they intentionally knew was wrong.
Right.
It's more just they didn't know that this is not the way that it should be done.
Right.
And did it anyway.
So going forward, he takes office in the president's chair. How can we make the best of having him as the president? Like, what do you think he brings to the table that now, okay, if this is what it's gonna be, let's make the best of it?
Yeah, well, it is kind of a wait and see. I mean, I think part of it is he has to come to campus and prove that he's one, obviously worthy of the job, but two, that he's going to be able to actually hold his political divisiveness from his past in the past and lead an open and inclusive campus. And that means like not say getting involved in the curriculum and trying to change what courses can be offered at YSU, because that's honestly not what any president does at a university. I mean, you can offer an opinion and and be involved in that process, but that's for the Office of Academic Affairs, right? They're responsible for the curriculum. So I think one, if he were to recognize that and say, I'm not going to be involved in curriculum matters, I'm going to be the president, and but I think that could help kind of alleviate some concerns that people have.
So like Bill Johnson, the politician, retires, and Bill Johnson, the CEO, is the guy that's taking the president. That'll make you feel a little bit better.
Well, I mean, yeah. So to not just say it, but also to show, right? And then two, to be willing to engage with campus and have open forums. Like it is one kind of too late from the process perspective, right? Because you've already been chosen,
right?
But it's not, it's like the more, if he's willing to have the open forums even after he starts, that's better than not having them at all, right? To allow faculty and staff and students and alumni and whoever else to go up and share their concerns with him directly and have him address those concerns.
Oh, he's absolutely going to get gang tackled.
Well,
he's totally.
But that's part of the job.
I'm telling you.
Right?
But that's why this is the harder road. Like, you could have avoided that gang tackle if you'd have done it previous, before.
In some ways, you can't hold it against Bill Johnson that the board selected him through this process. That's not his fault, right? But given that they did, and now that you are the president, now you have to face the fire and try and address the concerns associated with you, and not the process, right? Because we've tried to address the board about our concerns with the process, but address the concerns associated with you as the president of YSU, and so that I think does involve like being willing to just host more than one, open Q&A sessions with anybody who wants to come, right? And I think, at least I would imagine as a politician, he should be in some sense used to that, right? Or be able to do that and be able to, hear concerns and maybe even anger from what was his constituents, but now from the campus community that he's going to be leading.
So the stuff that going from Tressel to him, what kind of, you got to see Tressel actually in action. What do you think he brought to the table that absolutely we need to continue on, baton handoff to Johnson? Tressel had, I think, a lot of really positive attributes. I think he, one, was a good public face for YSU. He was obviously already well known. He was popular. By and large, and so I think he brought a lot of positive attention to YSU. He was always known to be a great fundraiser. Oh, yeah. I don't know exactly how much. I don't have the statistics, but the amount that he increased YSU Foundation's endowment was pretty remarkable. We already have, I think, the third largest endowment of all public universities in Ohio. And I'm telling you, he was in the public. He was everywhere that you would go. Tressel would be there, shaking hands and representing the university.
I think he was great at that part of the job, and that is a big part of the job of being a a university president is just being out in the community, representing the university, being willing to meet, with potential students, being willing to meet with stakeholders, potential, donors, and he did a great job at that. He was also, in some ways, detached from the curriculum matters. Like, he recognized that's not the job
thing,
of
right?
a university president. Let it be part of the Office of Academic Affairs. And so, yeah, I do hope that Bill Johnson kind of takes that same mentality and is able to do some of that same thing in terms of with the public and with fundraising. I'd say, one may be kind of negative, and and I know Jim Tressel personally. I'm a fan of him, and I think he did a good job by and large. But he was often not engaged in campus, right? He was well known to be outside of campus, and he was everywhere, right? And people knew who he was and that he was the president of YSU. But internally within campus, it did seem that he was not very well connected with, just what was going on campus,
Okay.
right? And so I think that's part of why I think we were disappointed that we were getting somebody who also had even much less higher education experience, right? That we were hoping for somebody that knew the way universities function, knew some of the problems that universities already have to deal with. But we're getting somebody who has, zero higher education experience and couldn't be expected to know the way universities function.
Yeah, and like our earlier topic, where it's going to be so critical in this area for, workforce development and creating, people that can be used in job functions here
That's
as we
right.
grow up and whatnot.
Yeah. So, it's like he is our president, to some degree, like it or not, right? And so we do, I believe, have to try to make the best of it. But I would just hope that he would be willing to show that he's willing to engage with campus, willing to address the concerns that the campus community has about him, sooner rather than later, and that we're able to work together and move YSU forward.
All right, AJ, thank you for coming down and talking with me. I appreciate it. I think we proved that we can talk to you without a meteor hurtling towards Earth. So.
Right. All right. Thanks, Joe. Bye.